I'm sure I have said, perhaps on more than one occasion, that not only am I not any kind of an ordained Buddhist religious leader, I'm certainly not a scholar of Buddhism. I'm basically what we would call an upasaka, a lay Buddhist. And while I became a Buddhist many, many years ago, back in 1979, and I've done a fair amount of reading, I don't put myself forward as any kind of an expert on Buddhism. In fact, I get amazed and floored when I read some of the things that I read in terms of people's in-depth scholarly knowledge and spiritual insights. But that said, those of you who regularly check in on my channel will be quite aware that I am doing a series of recitations on the Lankavatara Sutra, both in terms of unabridged recitations of pieces of the Lanka in the translation by Suzuki, as well as segments of Suzuki's comments on various concepts in the Lankavatara, and also have done some recitation of excerpts from the Awakening of Faith Shastra. And so within these great scriptures, what we have is a concept of Tathagatagarbha, or womb of the Tathagata, which to me is a very interesting concept. Again, it's not necessarily as relevant to my Shin Buddhist or Jodo Shinshu path in the sense, I don't need to get into the details of my faith-oriented approach, but still, it's quite interesting to learn about some of the concepts within Yogacara, Madhyamika, the early Chan teachers, and how these folks tried to understand the nature of enlightenment and the nature of our potential for Buddhahood. So anyhow, one of my subscribers recommended a particular book to me, which I obtained, called Sun-Faced Buddha. And what it is the Teachings of Ma-Tsu and the Hung-chou School of Chan, and it's by Cheng Chien Bhikshu. So it's by a monk, a Buddhist monk, who put this together. And the more I've read about Tsongmi and Ma-Tsu, the more I realize what a diversity of views and ideas and approaches there were in terms of both understanding and practice within the early Chan school in China. This was all in the context, I think, of Buddhism sort of being digested by the Chinese culture, once it came over from India. But anyhow, in looking at this book, I came across a couple, 3 pages that focus on this Tathagatagarbha concept, and I thought it might be of interest for me to read those to you and maybe make a comment or two along the way, particularly in terms of words that I had to look up because I didn't understand their meaning. So the author of this small volume says, the philosophical foundation of Ma-Tsu's teaching is mainly based on the Tathagatagarbha doctrine. The scriptural support of the Tathagatagarbha teaching can be found in such texts as the Srimala, that's the Queen Srimala Sutra, which I have recited, the Tathagatagarbha, the Surangama, which I hope to be able to recite, probably using the Charles Luck version, and then my friend Sean will sort of take my audio and re-upload that utilizing English and Chinese text on the screen, and that'll probably happen sometime in 2019. And the Perfect Enlightenment Sutras, which I guess is being referred to as the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, which I really love. And, I've done a couple of recitations of that, one with better audio, and now Sean is uploading the version of the good audio with the English and Chinese text on the screen. And he is better than I am at sort of doing post-production work on audio files, so I would certainly recommend that one to you, either on his channel, Dharma Chakra Wheel of Dharma, his channel, where he uploads these videos with music, or on mine, where if you prefer to listen without music, I'll be uploading them there. So anyhow, we're going through the scriptures that support the Tathagatagarbha, and the author says, as well as the Avatamsaka Sutra, especially its, quote, appearance of the Tathagata chapter, which I can't say that I'm immediately familiar with. I'm going to look that up. And in the Ratnagotra Vibhaga, which is the only extant Indian sastra, which gives more detailed treatment to this influential doctrine. And I think a sastra is like a commentary, which basically the Awakening of Faith scripture is also a commentary. The Tathagatagarbha is also found of course, in the Lankavatara Sutra and in the Awakening of Faith. But in these two texts, this author says, it is combined with the Yogacara or Yogacara doctrine of Alaya Vijnana. And I'll leave it to you to look up that term as it's discussed in Suzuki's treatment of the Lankavatara, which I've covered in other videos. So he goes on to say that the Tathagatagarbha doctrine represents a tendency in Buddhism to describe reality in more positive terms. Okay, we see Nagarjuna and the Madhyamika school talking in terms of emptiness, the void, sunyata. So this is more a flip side, is suchness, Tathagatagarbha, etc. So let's see what he says. The Tathagatagarbha doctrine represents a tendency in Buddhism to describe reality in more positive terms. The Tathagatagarbha, which is sometimes translated as the, quote, womb of Buddhahood, is conceived of as an indestructible essence present in all sentient beings, which is the cause for both the ultimate reality and the realm of phenomenal appearances. This essence, or, quote, seed, is described as being neither existent nor non-existent. So I take that to mean it's not to be confused with something eternal, with an eternally existing whatever you want to call it, whether Godhead or soul or whatever. This is something different. It is the suchness of things, suchness, the reality of what is experienced in this very moment, what we are experiencing right now. This essence or seed is described as being neither existent nor non-existent. It is the suchness of things, or when spoken of in more apophatic terms, their emptiness. I had to look that one up. What apophatic means is knowledge of God, or what I would think of as knowledge of the absolute, which is obtained through negation. So that was Nagarjuna's approach. What's the nature of reality? It's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. And so that's one way of sort of clearing out the weeds, clearing out the field to where, okay, what's left? Well, that's absolute reality. So let me read that sentence over again. It, meaning the Tathagatagarbha, is the suchness of things, or, when spoken of in more apophatic terms, the Tathagatagarbha is the emptiness of the suchness of things. So suchness is kind of the positive, emptiness is the flip side. We can all we can do is point with concepts. We can point to this truth of the absolute or reality either through the affirmation of suchness or through negation of all things, through the notion of emptiness. But in any case, it is neither existent nor non-existent. So he goes on to say that the Tathagatagarbha doctrine alleges that all living beings are endowed with the true mind, okay, which I guess we would say is the Buddha nature. All living beings are endowed with the true mind, which is fundamentally enlightened and pure by nature, and is only adventitiously covered with defilements. Okay, I had to look that one up. Adventitiously means coming from outside, not native, extrinsic, coming from the outside, okay? So this Tathagatagarbha is pure, but it's covered with defilements based on an external source, which has to do with, the five aggregates, the whole process of causation from ignorance on to old age and death. In other words, that what is created is a function of our dualistic thinking mind. Okay, well, we'll get into that a little more in a more articulate way with these quotes. So again, the Tathagatagarbha doctrine alleges that all living beings are endowed with the true mind, which is fundamentally enlightened and pure by nature, and is only adventitiously covered with defilements. In his preface to the collection of all explanations on the source of Chan, Tsung Mi, who I mentioned before, explains the Tathagatagarbha doctrine in the following manner, quote, "This teaching says that all sentient beings possess the true mind of emptiness and quiescence, whose nature is without inception, fundamentally pure. Bright, unobscured, astute, and constantly aware, it constantly abides to the end of time. It is called Buddha nature. It is also called Tathagatagarbha and mind ground. Because from time without beginning it has been concealed by false thoughts, sentient beings cannot realize it, and thereby experience birth and death. The supremely enlightened, namely the Buddha, feeling pity for them, manifests in the world to proclaim that all dharmas characterized by birth and death are empty, and to reveal the complete identity of this mind with all the Buddhas. The complete identity of this mind with all the Buddhas." Close quote. This true mind has also been described by Huang-po Si-yun, circa 850, who is traditionally regarded as Ma-Tsu's grandson in the Dharma, as follows, quote, "This mind has from the very beginning been independent of birth and death. It is neither green nor yellow, without form and characteristics. It does not belong to either existence or nothingness, and it cannot be reckoned as either young or old. It is neither long nor short, neither large nor small. It transcends all limitations, words, and traces. It is just this very thing. If you stir a thought, you miss it. It is like empty space, without limits, beyond conceptualization. It is only this one mind that is Buddha, and Buddha is not different from sentient beings." Close quote. Now, while in its essence the true mind, or the Buddha nature, is beyond thoughts and devoid of any signs, in response to things it can manifest itself in a variety of ways. It is this dynamic aspect of the true mind that is of paramount importance to Ma-Tsu, according to whom the realization of this mind, and thereby enlightenment, is to be achieved through recognizing it in its functions. So, the way, with a capital W, is not some abstract metaphysical principle. Our very words, thoughts, and actions are its function. Reality is not to be sought apart from daily life. Reality is present in everything, is everything, and it is only due to our ignorance that we fail to realize this. Therefore, quote, "all living beings have, since beginningless kalpas, been abiding in the samadhi of the Dharma nature," close quote, "and all ordinary activities are the Dharma nature." As Ma-Tsu is quoted by Young Ming Yen Shao in his Record of the Mirror of the Teachings, quote, "If you wish to know your mind, this very one that is talking now is your mind. This is what is called the Buddha, and is the true Dharmakaya of the Buddha, and is also called the way," close quote. However, due to beings, quote, "not knowing how to return to the source, they follow names and attach to forms, from which confusing emotions and falsehood arise, thereby creating all kinds of karma," close quote. It follows that, quote, "ignorance is to be ignorant of one's original mind," close quote, and enlightenment consists simply of, quote, "awakening to one's original nature," close quote. Since the true mind is already present in all beings, it is not something to be approached through cultivation, which implies a process of gradual progress through stages, and inevitably leads to dualistic thinking, which is the very cause of ignorance. And yet, the painfully obvious fact of our ignorance and suffering makes it plain that there is need for some form of cultivation. Quote, to attach to original purity and original liberation, to consider oneself to be a Buddha, to be someone who understands Chan, that belongs to the way of those heretics who deny cause and effect and hold that things happen spontaneously, close quote, says Ma-Tsu's disciple Pai Chang Huai Hai, 749 to 814. Ma-Tsu himself points out that, quote, if one says that there is no need for cultivation, then that is the same as ordinary ignorant people. While the way is not to be approached through cultivation, its realization is not outside of cultivation. Cultivation, as Ma-Tsu sees it, consists of not defiling our true nature. The defilements that are referred to are the mental tendencies of bifurcating reality into conflicting opposites of good and bad, right and wrong, worldly and holy. The defilements consist in thinking in dualistic terms and acting in contrived ways, in creating all kinds of views, opinions, desires, and attachments, and regarding all of them as real. So instead of trying to remove defilements which are themselves illusory, one has simply to realize their empty nature. This realization is correlated with letting go, which interrupts the habitual pattern of conceptual proliferation and lets the brightness of the original nature manifest itself. The phrase used by Ma-Tsu which best describes this kind of approach to cultivation is, quote, ordinary mind is the way, close quote. Ordinary mind is the mind that is free from the notions of good and bad, right and wrong, permanent and impermanent, worldly and holy. It is the mind that is free from activity, from grasping and rejecting. The following dialogue between Nan Chuan, 747 to 834, and his disciple, Cao Cao, 778 to 897, well illustrates the meaning of, quote, ordinary mind. One day Cao Cao asked Nan Chuan, what is the way? Ordinary mind is the way, said Nan Chuan. Cao Cao asked, can it still be approached? Nan Chuan said, if you try to approach it, you go away from it. Cao Cao further asked, if we do not approach it, how can we know that it is the way? Nan Chuan replied, the way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is false awareness. Not knowing is neutral. If without any doubt you truly penetrate the way, then it is like empty space, vast and open. How can then there be any quibble about right and wrong?